Hi everyone. So the topic for our talk today is data governance and data pipeline. We'll be taking one of the product offered by Microsoft called Purview as our case study, where we'll be talking about what exactly the data pipeline is and what the data lineage is and the other relevant terms that fall into the same context. And we'll see it from the different perspective. Primarily, we are going to focus on the perspective of a owner, or you can say the product manager, or someone who need to understand what the business value that a product brings into the market and what exactly was being missing over the period of time until this had not been adopted. Talking about the Purview, it's a product from Microsoft. We have all multiple similar products already in the market. If you talk about IBM Watson Knowledge Catalog, that's also one of the offering, a cloud native offering from IBM. So we'll talk about the comparison of the different product we have from the data governance domain. However, I would like to start from the perspective of a product manager for the product Purview. So if you go by the definition, we see Microsoft Purview is an enterprise data governance and compliance platform. So it's a platform wherein we can deal with all the compliance that are defined for the data whenever data is flowing across the different system, be it in at rest. So we can say interchangeably, data governance or data lineage both go hand in hand. However, data governance ensure the compliance and data lineage allow us to backtrack or draw the origin of the data and its transformation across the different services or the system that came across in the platform. So talking about the Microsoft Purview, it's basically Microsoft Fabric. It's built on Microsoft Fabric and Azure infrastructure. And before we go in detail, we'll try to see what are the key perspective we have. Key perspective are like it has unified data and data map and cataloging. It means irrespective of the people working in different verticals across in an enterprise, be it a technical user or the functional user or a business user, who are working in silos, hardly have interaction, or they are not, their context is not falling, overlapping across. How do they understand the common persona? How do they understand the functionality of the data that you are talking about? So that is something that is being maintained in a catalog. So it's a unified centralized location to maintain the cataloging. Then it classify the data. Considering at a high level, we do classify data as PI data or non-PI data, where PI stands for any uh, data that can identify a person, and that PI data is something that should be masked or should not be available on the public platform. And HIPAA or the GDPR, these are the compliance that fall into the picture when we talk about the PI data. So at high level, we in the preview we have a provision to classify whether data is PI or financial, and again, AI comes into picture here. They have used AI powered classifiers, be it like at a, for a very beginner, we can say AI classifier nothing but that classify data into two categories using the pre-trained set of data. For example, there is an email or phone. This is something a model already understand beforehand and can classify those as the PI data. Then the other provision is end-to-end lineage tracking. It's something we can visualize the data flow across the system for transparency and also helps in the auditing. So we know the origin of the data and where all it got changed over the period of time. Maybe it got imputation of the data, or we got some data quality introduced, or there is some corruption happened over that whole path. So this helps for tracking. So in simple term, it's called the data lineage. Then we go for the policies that a person or a company on the whole need to be compliant with respect to data sharing. Now the plus point here for Microsoft Purview is like they already have a system in place. The big system, enterprise system we call about Microsoft 365, Azure or Power BI. The only thing left was just to do the integration with this. So this brings the value on the table of already having the infrastructure in place. We'll talk detail on the same by considering the product manager or the product owner perspective. But first of all, we'll try to understand who is the target audience for this. Who is going to use the data pipeline or data lineage? What exactly and where exactly does drawing the data lineage or understanding the data flow across the system helps a user, and who are those users? These are basically the CIOs or the chief data officers, compliance leaders who need to do the auditing, and we need to ensure that the data is compliant and it's not being compromised over the period when it flow across the different systems. So this is one of the very important and we'll say a primary prerequisite, and a company has to meet whosoever is working on data. And as we know, data is a fuel in today's world, and this has to be compliance with that. So this is something that makes data lineage and data governance a very critical and crucial thing that has to be implemented across the system. So now we see what exactly this preview product is solving, why we exactly need it. Isn't it something that could be done without bringing this data pipeline or lineage into picture? So if you go to pre-SaaS world, there we had more like a fragmented cloud on premises or SaaS system. So in other words, we say data was being hosted in silos in different locations, be it on premises or on the different cloud offering we had. So what's the issue? What's the challenge out here? It's a challenge for the data and also for the compliance team, because you need to maintain the visibility and need to ensure that data is not being compromised or being exposed or is not susceptible for any cyber security attack, or you can say any intention of attacking the data is also brings a big concern for the organizations. So the agenda was to bring it in at one single platform, in a centralized platform, basically you can say in other terms. So now if you talk about the basic specific pain points, what's the pain point? Now whenever product owner or product leader is thinking, he'll think from the consumer apathy the first. So what are the pain points for the user here? If we talk about in the context of B2B model, it's any organization who is hosting their data on, for example, if I'm being an organization, I'm hosting my data on AWS, what challenges do I face? So here I'm posing as a customer, and what made Microsoft as a service provider to think about the pain point and came up with the ideation of the Purview. So we classify it as like data silos, data residing in different sources, and discovery of the data, the auto discovery of the data to for fetching the data and to crawl the data across the system is a big challenge. Then regulation came in picture. We know GDPR came in picture around a decade back. Prior to that, there was not that compliance, but seeing the increased incident of the data security and to ensure the data breach issues to be mitigated, it's a government policy that came in to implement the GDPR that ensure that data is compliance, and then we have to ensure the data is not compromised or is not classified in a wrongly manner that might expose cause a security or reputational risk. That's the fourth point we see here. So on the whole, if we summarize, we can say the major pain point for the user was a data theft or data security. They need to ensure the data should not be compromised at any cost. So basically, if you talk about the target audience are basically who are directly interacting with the data, having specific elevated privileges. We refer them as data stewards or compliance officers who have access as per their role defined across the system, because they need to adhere to the compliance, and not everyone need to have the permission or the access to elevated access to access those PI data. So mainly the target audience was quite confined segment of daily users, confined to data steward and compliance officers. So why this problem actually matters? If you say it's for some specific set of users, a small chunk of segment of users, why this is a problem? So problem is bigger not from the perspective of the user base, but from the perspective of how intense the risk is if the data is being misused or audit gets failed, or we get to understand there's a data failure and we get to know that too late when the damage has been done. So that is one of the problem. And since we didn't have the centralized governance system in place and data being residing in silos, the risk kept on growing with as we got more as we get exposed to more data. Like we got data lake, data bricks, all sort of integration tool in place. So we are at a verge of working on data in size of TVs, but not having a centralized governance was posing a challenge. So we were not able to get a consistent lineage. We were not able to classify the decision, and decision making itself gets late. And if the data is compromised, after all, it's like it's losing a customer trust. So primarily, if when considering if this has not been in place, now a product manager or product owner think like, oh, okay, let's bring it in place. But what happens if you don't bring it in on table? If you still say, okay, it's not required, what happens if you do the inaction? So here comes the picture. Data gets breached, it not compliance, it falls into the bracket of the federal government. You'll get the regulatory fines. It's a direct hit on the revenue, on the prestige of the company. Again, we don't have centralized location for the data, so data gets deduplicated. Has to be done deduplicate for instance, we'll have duplicate data, inefficient data, and computing also goes high because we are having same data being stored at a different location. We have to inflate our expenses for storing the data, and computing itself goes high on scale. Similarly, the reduced agility and also the loss of competitive advantages. So competitive advantage, if we talk, it's primarily we are talking here in the AI initiative that is that is lately becoming a very inevitable part of any product. So until we don't have a data confined or the compliance data, it's very difficult to get the adoption of the AI initiative basically. So the solution came from the Microsoft Purview. So Microsoft Purview was the solution, and how it addressed the challenge because it created a centralized unified central system that is cloud native and is compliance with the data governance and has the capability to connect across the different offerings from the from the Microsoft, that's Azure, or maybe the external cloud like AWS, Google Cloud, or any on-prem environments also. So basically, it eases the problem of data discovery, that is fetching data across the different system. Classification mean able to classify the data well because data is well structured. We're not having duplicate data because we're maintaining it at a centralized location. We have easy lineage tracking. We know where the data is coming from. We can ensure that we can do the data classification at ease, and it improves the market go to market strategy also. And we are saving at a cost. We are saving the cost of development and changing and having the different tech stack from the technical perspective, and also revenue won't take a hit in that case because our go to market rate time is time frame is getting less. It's being brought down, like internally we can say, if not 50%, at least even 20% of the impact by implementation of the new tech stack. Maybe you can say if it brings the go to market time down by 20%, that's also good enough to start with. So what are the core component? It has what are the core components of the Microsoft Purview? They have Purview data map that automatically maps the data sets and relationship across sources. So here sources, we are talking about the different verticals of an enterprise, be a technical or the business user. Then we have data catalog. That is something a steward or based on the role a person can look for the data, can understand the data lineage where the data is coming from. And also, since it's a compliance, so it makes it very easy to get the data insight and mitigates the risk of faulty data, to be specific. And also it gets an offering of using multiple connectors. As our system increases, we have centralized location, so we can use as more APIs and connectors. So does it facilitates an onboarding for third party or hybrid data system, because the onboarding boarding processes turned out to be a unified one and same across the different clients. So the USPs, what is the differentiation? Microsoft already had this system in place. When we talk about Power BI, Microsoft 365, these are already the early entrant in the market. So they are all. So we are left with to just to do the integration, and rest of the parts are already in place. We use the AI-driven classification, so we can trust the data more further, and it automates the process to scale up the process of classification as well, to avoid the faulty classification with the help of AI. Then we get end-to-end data compliance view by drawing the governance and the data lineage. Then it's scalable as well because it's a serverless model and everything hosted on the native cloud platform. So as we already discussed, it talk the next section talk about the current solution industry landscape. So it's something it's saying in case if before Purview came into picture, what are the challenges? The same thing, but we have articulated from the perspective of at a very fine level, like how it can be utilized from a business user perspective. Like earlier, the data was being fetched from spreadsheet, SharePoint logs, or custom ETL tracking. And managing those was a troublesome for the end user, be it a business user, and it was not easy to trust the data because it involves a lot of manual intervention, and risk of data corruption or the wrong data being generated was high. Now, if we there are some of the weakness that we have mentioned here of the manual intervention that we just talked about in the earlier system. Now, if we talk about the deployment plan, considering how Purview would have been moved from the ideation to launch, or if we say if we are going to come up with an idea, what are the basic steps that we need to understand, and what should be the structured chronology to understand which step to come when, and how we can ship the product from the ideation, considering this as a product Purview. Now, see how Microsoft would have done that. So we'll take Microsoft as an analogy to understand the various vital aspects. So very first stage that comes to discover the opportunity. What the opportunity do we find? Where do we find an opportunity, or where do we find the gap? So gap was like we didn't had a unified, a centralized data governance thing. Data was residing silos, and they already have done the research using their enterprise clients, and they had compliance regulators. And again, it was something that could be easily validated across the Microsoft itself because they have most of the system parts already in place. And then the next stage came with the concept development. They need to understand what exactly is the solution, what we are going to attain at a very priority level. If we set the priority, this solution is bringing a lot of things in place, like scalability because hosted on cloud, integration with multiple sources because it will be centralized location, and it will be more data will be more safe because we'll be having compliance in place, and data will not be falsely classified because the data classification would be done here based on AI as well as in in a centralized location. But what is the major point that defines the solution? That is a single source of truth, means a centralized location where the data would be compliant and would be able to draw the data lineage for same, and that is something could be used as a source of truth for the at a global level. So we get we get rid of the issues with the data deduplication or data being hosting in silos. So it turns out to be one single source of truth. Then the next step was they have to understand the benchmarking. What extra you are giving on top of the existing early entrant in the market, like Collabra, Al- Altation, or Informatica, are already there. So therein it comes like the research part. Solution you have derived, you have identified the gap. That's the first thing to do discovery. Second step was to define solution. What exactly the solution is. Though obviously there are the other aspects that it's handling, but what the exact solution is giving, it's a single source of truth. Then comes the market research. We need to understand if some companies are already there in the market, some early entrants are already in the market. What we are giving on top of that. So that was like you need to figure out the different opportunity, like we've seen in the case of automation, scaling, and integration, and also since it's a cloud driven and AI driven as well, so it bring cherry on top for this product. Then we have to do the prototyping. They had tested with the Fortune 500 customers through Azure Preview program. It's more like A/B testing, you can say, an extended version of A/B testing, where the prototyping was done and an experience was drawn and it was shown as a preview studio UI to get the beta user feedback. Then iteratively it kept on being built. So once the prototyping is done, we got the response from the beta user. It turns out to be positive. The product development starts, and it's being done as per the agile methodology and done in iteration. Then once it's done, we come for marketing and launch. Then what is the positioning? Now, if you talk about one of the classical use case of Tata Nano coming in market, Tata Nano was a car. It's a classic example that came in market, but its positioning was wrong. Positioning was wrong because though it was given at a cheaper rate, but it was again based on the petrol engine. It was not an electric car, for example, or we can say it didn't get aligned with the people's sentiments. Like because the car in Indian scenario was is considered as a status symbol, and getting a cheap car, it gave a different perspective for the user. It doesn't elevate the status of a person. So the user persona here was more aligned with the status symbol that company was not able to track. So that was the time, like we say, the positioning was not correct. So what positioning did Purview give in its place? It didn't give the positioning of okay, we can integrate a large set of data, we'll bring it some centralized location, but their positioning was from the perspective of data safety and governance. And as in the first step, we said in the very first point here, we talked about idea generation, discovery, the opportunity. So the discovery here was like to get the governance only. However, the solution is given in terms of single source of truth, but single source of truth again, it's something that certifying a data to be compliant and the exact how the data should be. There's no data quality being compromised here. Then after the development is done, when we come to product marketing launch, we we need to very specific how we are positioning the campaign that we are giving before launching into the market and making people to adapt. What is the positioning was given with respect to data governance as a governance fabric. Then post launch also they had a like lineage visualization, and on top that given the different variations. So why, when we say like we already have multiple products like the IBM WKC, that's what Watson Knowledge Catalog. Why we still have we had to launch the Microsoft Purview, a similar product but by different company. So that will be talking in the next session, where we will be talking about, or the next discussion where we'll be talking about product strategy, market fit, what are technical architecture, experiences, and return of investment. All this will be talking in detail. Basically, in the next discussion, we are going to talk about this product following this particular standard template that will be following in the next forthcoming sessions as uh, case studies as well. So I hope this gave a good sense of what exactly we are intending to do here. So I think we had a good discussion here, and please post the comments. I'll try to improvise the same on the aspects if has been missed here. Thanks for being there.